We're live. Good morning. I am Jenna Winters from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Thank you so much for joining us for the fourth in our series of Ohio Bird's Eye. Today's webinar is going to be about cavity nesters, and I would like to introduce you first to Julie Gee. Julie is a naturalist at Burr Oak, so here is Julie.
Hi everyone, so glad you're with us. Cindy and I are really excited to share lots of great information about cavity nesters.
Okay, Cindy, you're live. Say hello, Cindy.
Hi, everybody. I've been following cavity nesters, taking care of them for about 30 or more years, so it is exciting to get started on this venture with you all.
And we also have Lauren Gregory joining us today as a producer. Say hello, Lauren.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here with all of you.
All right, and with that, we will get started. Here is Julie.
Okay, I'm going to be sharing my PowerPoint. So just one or a couple seconds here as it comes up.
All right, Julie, your PowerPoint's good.
Okay. I'm just putting it in presenter view. Okay. Well, as you know, you are here to learn about cavity nesting birds. And before we get started, I wanted to just review the agenda that we're going to cover today. First, we'll start with the different types of habitats that we have in Ohio that have cavity nesting birds associated with them. Then we're going to look at some actual nest boxes, some taxidermy specimens of some nesting birds, and some actual nests that you can see inside the nest boxes. Then we'll talk about the factors that you should consider when you're installing a nest box. And finally, we will end with some resources that you can use for more information about nest boxes and about cavity nesting birds in general. So before we launch into the habitats and their associated cavity nesters, we have a question to ask you that you will have a link sent to you so that you can answer this question for us. And the question is there a bird you are hoping to attract to your property with a nest box? If you have an idea of a bird that you would really like to use a nest box on your property, please type the name of that bird using the link that you should see sent to you. And while you're answering that, I'm going to play the songs of two different cavity nesters. So if you recognize the call or song of either one of those birds, think about it for a minute. The first audio clip was an eastern bluebird, which is a very common nesting bird. And the second clip of audio was from a Carolina wren that was saying its classic tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle song. So maybe you guessed those as you were listening to those clips. Let's move on now to talk about the habitat. Oh. Hold on. All right, let's move on to the different types of habitats and the birds that are associated with those habitats. We are going to start with a forest or woodland habitat. And of course, when you think of forests, you have to think of woodpeckers. We have 7 species of woodpeckers in Ohio. All of them are cavity nesters. The downy woodpecker is the smallest and most common woodpecker that we have in Ohio. The northern flicker is a medium-sized woodpecker, and it's a little bit unusual because you will see northern flickers on the ground more than any other woodpecker. That's because northern flickers love ants, so lots of times they're on the ground looking for and eating ants. Then our largest woodpecker in Ohio is the pileated woodpecker, and it is always a thrill to see a pileated woodpecker. Woodpeckers are very important because they provide the cavities for other birds to use. They have a beak that is like a chisel, so they can literally chisel out wood, and they actually have a special spongy material in their head that allows them to do this chiseling without suffering any type of damage to their brain or to their head. So they are out there actually constructing cavities that they use, but then other birds use those cavities. So they're so critical to our cavity nesting birds. Of course, if you get lucky and get to see a nest of a pileated woodpecker, this is what you would see. That is the dad woodpecker with the red mustache, and those 2 young birds are greeting their father and of course probably saying, "Please feed me, give me some food to eat." The next forest or woodland species that you might find is the group of birds we call chickadees. We have 2 chickadees in Ohio. If you live in the southern 2/3 of Ohio, you will be seeing Carolina chickadees. If you live in the northern 1/3 of Ohio, then you will have black-capped chickadees. Black-capped chickadees and Carolina chickadees are very difficult to tell apart visually. And what can even make it harder is the fact that along that northern black-capped chickadee boundary and southern Carolina chickadee boundary, the species can hybridize, which makes it even more difficult to identify them. So you usually have to know what their song sounds like and really know where you live geographically to know whether you have them. They are just one of the cutest birds out there, and I know people love seeing these at their bird feeders too. I want to share with you a Carolina chickadee nest that's in a nest box that I have on my property. And I took this video in the beginning of May, so we'll take a look at the inside of this box. You can see they use a lot of moss to construct their nest. And you're going to have to look real close down to the bottom of the nest. There are the babies. You can see one of them you can see still has some pink flesh, and there's a little bitty beak that you can see of another baby. These chickadees in this nest box are only about 5 days old. Also notice that these chickadees used hair from my dog to make their nest nice and soft when they built this nest. So they found lots of moss, hair from the dog, some grapevine bark, outer grapevine bark, and they make a very nice soft nest for their babies. Let's take a look at another type of bird that is found nesting in the forest, and that would be the nuthatches. Nuthatches are the only bird that you will see heading down the trunk of a tree head first. So if you see a bird that's making its way down a tree trunk head first, you know you're looking at a nuthatch. The white-breasted nuthatch is found around the entire state of Ohio, and red-breasted nuthatches are more common in Northeast Ohio, which is the main area that they will breed and nest. Now we're going to switch to a couple of species that are thrilling and fun to see, a couple of owls that you can find nesting in cavities here in Ohio. The eastern screech owl is pretty interesting. They will nest in tree cavities along the edges of forests, and even sometimes along the edge of a park, or even if you have property that has some nice mature forest in the area with cavities, you could have an eastern screech owl nesting near you. They're very unusual because you can have a red phase baby and a gray phase baby in the same nest, as this photo shows you here. They, of course, are masters at camouflage. You might be walking by a tree with nesting screech owls and not even know it. They blend in so well to the tree bark. Then my favorite owl, and also a nesting owl in our forests, is the barred owl. This is the owl that is famous for its "who cooks for you all" call. It's very identifiable and recognizable when you hear that call. They love mature forest with ravines that have streams at the bottom. That's their favored habitat. We have lots of barred owls at Burr Oak State Park, which is where I work as the naturalist. And the reason we have barred owls is because we have lots of mature forest with ravines and streams at the bottom. So that's the type of habitat you can find them living in and also nesting in. One interesting feature of the barred owl, they are one of only 2 owls in Ohio that have dark black eyes, like you can see in these images here. The other owl in Ohio with dark eyes is the barn owl, B-A-R-N. Now we're going to switch habitats and look at what types of cavity nesters are associated with fields or open areas. The eastern bluebird, I consider the poster child for nest boxes. People have been putting up nest boxes for eastern bluebirds for a long time. In the United States, it became very popular starting in the 1960s. A lot of people started putting up nest boxes for bluebirds at that time. And people then and now will create bluebird trails where they have many bluebird nest boxes, all kind of in a trail in the same area. I do want to share with you a nest box that was, again, this box is on my property here at my house, and I took this video inside this nest box back the first week of May. This was the first brood for these bluebirds, and they went on to have a second brood in this box after this brood was complete. So let's take a look at this.
This is a peek into an eastern bluebird nest. And you can see that the babies are getting very large. They're going to be ready to fledge pretty soon, so I'm not going to stay here long. But this is just so thrilling to see these babies in this nest box. 'Cause
one thing that both Cindy and I wanted to share with you during the webinar today is some of the rewards that you get from having nest boxes that you can monitor and keep track of. And for me, this is definitely one of the top rewards of having nest boxes. You get to see the whole life cycle of these birds from the time that the egg was laid, the mother incubating the eggs, the little babies hatching out, and then growing to the point that they're going to fledge or leave the nest. And it is just thrilling, as I already said, and a deep sense of gratification to see this new life coming out of the nest box. Let's take a look at another bird associated with field areas, and that is the tree swallow. They're easy to identify with their iridescent greenish, purplish, blackish back and white bellies. They will very often use bluebird boxes that you have put up. So don't be surprised if you have tree swallows that decide to use the bluebird box. Tree swallows also are famous for dive bombing you while you go out and monitor your box. If I know I have tree swallows in a box, I'm going to put a hat on before I go out and monitor that box. The prothonotary warbler is considered an uncommon and localized breeder in Ohio. So you're not going to find this bird everywhere. And notice we've switched habitats to wet areas. Historically, prothonotary warblers nested in swamp forests in Ohio. And unfortunately, many, if not most, of the swamp forest, bottomland forests that we had in Ohio have disappeared. So they still, of course, prefer that type of habitat, but there isn't as much of that habitat around anymore. We have had an increase in prothonotary warblers due to nest box trails. In Ohio, the largest nest box trail that we have is in Delaware County on Hoover Reservoir, where there were in 2013 is the latest data from the Ohio Breeding Bird Atlas. In 2013, there were 179 separate territories, so separate bird territories by the prothonotary warbler set up on Hoover Reservoir in Delaware County. That means you could have 179 nesting pairs along that nest box trail for prothonotary warblers. Another bird associated with wet areas is the wood duck. Wood ducks you're going to find along rivers, lakes, and ponds. You cannot mistake this bird if you see the male, especially. It honestly looks like an artist has just taken a paintbrush and painted the colors and the different patches of color and patterns on the wood duck. A beautiful bird to see. They will nest in tree cavities anywhere from 6 to 30 feet up in a tree. Then when it's time for those baby ducks to leave the nest, they literally jump out of that cavity, hit the ground and bounce a little bit, and then mama duck leads them to water. Now we're going to switch to mixed habitat birds, and there are a few birds that we have that are definitely associated with this. The Carolina wren is an awesome bird to have. They are so feisty and they have a very loud call, especially for the size of bird that this is. You heard that Carolina wren call when I asked that first question at the beginning of our webinar. They like forests, open woodlands, shrubby areas, and they are also famous for building nests in unconventional places like hanging baskets or maybe a piece of pottery that was just hanging outside, or even a boot that someone had in their garage. I have had at my house Carolina wrens build nests in hanging baskets, in the plastic bottom of a wheelbarrow. I had a successful Carolina wren nest. And this summer, I had a Carolina wren pair that insisted on building a nest inside my garage, where I had a helmet for wearing on a four-wheeler sitting on a shelf. And they kept going in and in, and eventually I had to just keep my garage door closed because I didn't want them nesting in my garage.
Hey, Julie, I got a picture sent by one of our attendees. Actually, another ODNR person, Deb Green, sent me a picture of Carolina wrens in her mailbox.
Oh, cool. Can we share that at the end, maybe? Or
I'm going to see. Actually, you know what? Give me just a second here. Asking me if I want to share. I do have the picture up. Let's see if it'll let me. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yes, we can see
it. So yeah, Deb just sent that to me a few minutes ago of them checking out her mailbox. So
yeah, and it looks like they've started a nest over there on the right.
Yep. All right, Julie, you want to take control and put your presentation back up.
Okay, so do I need to share it again?
Yes, I have stopped sharing, and so it's on you now. So just share your presentation again.
All right, are we back on okay?
It says the live event, it just takes it a minute. There you are, you're good.
Okay, great. Well, I do want to next share some video that I took from a nest box on my property of Carolina wrens building a nest. And you're going to see the variety of nesting materials they use. That's the female bringing in some leaves with a little bit of the stem still attached to those leaves, and she's going to pull it into the box. And just there she goes, pulling in that leaf stem. Here comes the male with some pine needles for the nest. And he's going to return in just a moment with moss. You can see the moss in his beak as he goes in. And then you're going to see a bird fly in right there on the top of that predator guard. That is actually a fledgling from the first brood that these parents raised. And he's there watching his mom and dad build that nest. What I think is hysterical is in just a moment, he has the audacity to beg to be fed right there and right there, trying to get his parents to feed him while they are super busy building a brand new nest in that nest box. And again, this is another reward, another joy of having cavity nesters, being able to watch the behavior of these birds, the natural behavior of them building a nest, bringing in the different materials for that nest. Another wren that will use nest boxes is the house wren. And house wrens are famous for sticking a bunch of sticks inside any nest boxes in the same area. So the male house wrens will defend more than one cavity, and they are the ones that are filling in the nest boxes in their territory. The problem is then that no other bird can use that nest, and the female is only going to select one of those boxes. So just something to be aware of, if you have house wrens and you see them filling up all the boxes, you'll probably have to take those twigs and sticks out of the boxes if you want other bird species to nest in those boxes. But house wrens are just as feisty as the Carolina wrens. Another mixed habitat bird is the tufted titmouse. They like large deciduous trees, and you can find those trees that they might nest in forest, in parks, in suburban neighborhoods, anywhere that you have mature trees. Of course, lots of you have probably seen tufted titmice at your feeders. They're a very common feeder bird. Then the last bird that I wanted to talk about is the purple martin, which is Ohio's largest swallow. And according to the Ohio Breeding Bird Atlas, the purple martin is more closely associated with humans than any other native bird species in North America. East of the Rocky Mountains, which is us, purple martins only nest colonially in human-provided nest boxes. Those nesting sites are very frequently these gourds that you see here painted white. And again, they nest communally, so they're going to have a lot of these gourds together, and those birds seem to prefer that. They have declined considerably in Ohio, and so it's a great thing to be able to provide nesting areas for purple martins. Of course, they're great insect eaters. They're fun to watch. You can use either gourds like this or a multi-compartment house specifically for purple martins. Now I'm going to turn over the webinar to Cindy, but before we look at some nest box examples, we have another question for you to answer, and the link is going to be sent to you. That question is, do you have a nest box installed at home right now? And what bird species have used your nest box? I'm going to play the call of a cavity nesting bird as you put your answers in the link. I'm hoping that you probably guessed which bird that was. If you didn't, that's the pileated woodpecker with calls and then the sound of it drumming on a nice, probably partially hollowed out tree. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn over the webinar to Cindy.
Okay, Cindy, you should be live in just a second. We've switched it over. Looks like we're having a tiny bit of trouble with Cindy. We're going to give her a minute to get back on. Julie, the first question that you asked about what cavity nesters were people interested in, people did say bluebirds, which you talked about, and also people were interested in kestrels.
Oh, okay. Very good.
So that may be something that Cindy's going to talk about. We do have Cindy back, and I am going to send her live again. Let's see. I think we have her this time. Cindy, I think you're muted, so turn your microphone back on. Oh, there you are. Okay.
I apologize. A little technical difficulty from somebody who's not too tech savvy. But I did want to, since we ended up with that call of the pileated woodpecker, I thought I would show you an actual pileated woodpecker specimen. So these are the largest Ohio woodpecker, and they also create quite a large hole in a tree, a little bit rectangular. So a larger bird can use a pileated woodpecker hole. You can certainly see how long their beak is here. And as Julie stated earlier in her great presentation about the soft material in their head so they can continue to hammer away on a tree. In fact, I believe there's studies out where they're trying to figure out how to create those kind of helmets for football players so they can take a little bit more of a beating on the football field. I enjoy this woodpecker. As you can see, it has like piano keys in the wings. So kind of a piano key woodpecker, but the largest one, quite impressive when you see these ones in the wild. I'm going to get another specimen of a woodpecker to show you. So this is another one of the primary cavity nesters. It is the northern flicker, or sometimes called the yellow shafted flicker. You can see the yellow shaft in the feather. You can truly see that from underneath that yellow shaft. As Julie stated earlier, these guys like to eat ants, so you'll find them on the ground on frequent occasions. Another really pretty woodpecker. Okay, so these woodpeckers, as I said, create the primary nesting cavity. And what I want to do now is show you a woodpecker cavity. So right here, I have a hole in the branch of a tree, the larger branch of a tree. This tree fell in my friend's backyard, and he decided he wanted to see what it looked like from the inside. So it was already down and done. So he sliced it vertically, and you can see how deep that hole goes. I'll put my hand up here next to it. And it goes down in quite deep, and the woodpecker's nest is still somewhat in there. But as Julie stated, we have our secondary cavity nesters that will use these vacated holes of woodpeckers for their own nests. The bluebird, who is very dependent on holes in trees and doesn't often find them anymore, is thankful that we provide boxes, but if they find one of these, they're very happy to use it. And this is about the size of their hole, which is no bigger than 1.5 inches, really, for eastern bluebirds, or 1 9/16 inches if you're a mountain bluebird. So that is the woodpecker cavity. And in this regard, because of this, I want to encourage everybody out there, if you have a dead tree on your property and it is not going to be a danger for anyone, leave it there, because the woodpeckers love it, and thus the other cavity nesters like it as well. So keep those dead forested timbers in your yard or on the outskirts of your yard if you can. So since we started out talking about the forest creatures that will use our nest boxes, I'm going to show you a nest box that can be used by either an American or a kestrel that you just mentioned, or a screech owl. The hole's about 3 inches in diameter, and it's quite deep, but it's a good box for that. Now, a wood duck will use a box that has a 3-inch hole one direction, but it's an oval hole, so it would be 4 inches the other direction. But this is quite a large box, and at the end, I think Julie is posting a web page where you can go to get all the plans for these different boxes that I'm going to show you. So it's really, if you want to attract some of these birds and you have the right habitat, provide them a box and they might just find it and start to use it. have a little wren box here. I guess I should wait on this one to talk about it when the wrens come along. So let me finish up with the forest here quick first. So we were talking about the screech owls using that box. Here's a little screech owl. This is a gray brown faced screech owl that Julie had that great picture of this owl blending in so well with the habitat where it was located that people could not see this bird. So it is small, about the size of my hand. We could go into a lot of detail on these birds and their habits and mannerisms, and what Julie and I discussed that we could easily talk for many hours about this topic. And then we have a barred owl, my favorite as well, because I love their call. The barred owl needs a slightly larger hole, but it also will use a nest box if you provide it. Again, a forest creature that likes those hollers with some water in them, maybe some mature conifer trees. So if you have those, chances are you might hear a barred owl in your backyard. So let's see what the next category is that we were going to talk about today. Field birds. So I don't have any bluebirds that are taxidermied. We thankfully have not found any laying in the yard that were good specimens. We've just let them go and they fly away on their own. But I do have a bluebird box here. This is a sample box of a box that you can make for your bluebirds, which will also bring you many other kinds of birds. There is a small predator guard on this box, which can prevent the raccoon arm from getting way down in there. It just gives another layer to keep that raccoon from getting his hand inside of there for those delicious eggs that he wants to eat. So this is one sample, and Julie will have more for us to be able to make. I do have this opening on the side here, and let's see if I can just turn it. I don't know, I don't have my screwdriver out here. I guess I won't, oh, there we go. So this box will open up for easy viewing and easy cleaning. You want to make sure you get your nest out of there as quickly as they have left the box, as the nestlings or fledglings have left, because the parents will come back and rebuild very quickly if it's right conditions. As you can see on this box, there is ventilation on both sides. That's really important. This box has not been painted, but if you are making a bluebird box at home and you want to paint it, please use a very light color so the temperature doesn't get too hot inside, and don't paint the inside of the box. And oh, another really important thing to help you so you attract bluebirds and not house sparrows is to not put a perch on here. A bluebird does not need a perch, and a house sparrow will prefer that. So don't give those house sparrows any more opportunity than they already take on their own. So if you have a bluebird box, you may experience other kind of birds in your boxes, and I'm going to show you some of those nests. So of course, the bird you want to attract to your box is going to be, I'm going to turn the screen a little bit so you can see inside there, is going to be the bluebird. This is an eastern bluebird nest, and they use grasses and make a nice, neat, round cup for their eggs. There is a bluebird egg in there. When this nest was retrieved by the person who put this together for me, the adults had been killed by house sparrows. So we had to, you know, the eggs were not going to get incubated. So that's what happened with this box. But you can tell the difference here. Here's, the, like I said, the eastern bluebird nest. And here's the house sparrow nest. Okay, quite a bit different in the way they look. the house sparrow will use an abundance of materials. It's put into this nest box very sloppily. And I kind of compare this, hopefully I don't alienate anybody with this comment, but this kind of reminds me of my teenagers' bedrooms when they were living at home. Kind of just a messy nest. You know, things kind of helter-skelter in there, just all over the place, where the bluebirds, again, just build a nice, neat cup. So you can tell, of course, if you're going to eliminate a house sparrow nest, you want to make sure that you're not eliminating a bluebird nest. And I say that because bluebirds and all of the other songbirds are protected by the federal government. So you cannot eliminate those nests or any part of the nesting material or the eggs or anything. But house sparrows are not protected by the federal government. They are an invasive species. They came into the United States in about 1850. And by the early 1900s, they were the most common bird in the United States. They are very aggressive, non-native species that will kill adults, that will kill babies, that will peck eggs, that will take over the nest. So if you are wanting to see bluebirds, please be mindful of this and make sure that you're making sure that you're not getting house sparrows in there. You do not want to have the house sparrows take over your bluebird boxes. So be very conscientious about that. Otherwise, you're just doing the bluebirds harm. So some of the other birds that might visit that nest box, black-capped chickadees, as Julie talked about earlier, and you can just see a little bit of moss in here. They like drier lint, dog hair, human hair. They'll use anything that's soft and fluffy too. They have very small eggs as well. They're a tiny bird, so they like a soft, fluffy nest. Julie mentioned the house wren and that they'll build their nests just about anywhere. They like to use pine needles and branches for their nest. So if I find a box with pine needles and branches in it, I can almost guarantee that it's going to be a house wren occupying that box. In fact, I had a scout troop put up boxes at Pymatuning State Park a couple of weeks ago, and we already have a house wren living in one of those boxes. So pine needles and branches. And one other bird that might visit your bluebird box, as Julie mentioned, was the tree swallow. Now, swallows, I like to say, a way to remember the nesting material they use is you would never want to swallow a feather, would you? Well, swallows use feathers. They use lots and lots of feathers. They clean up parking lots of gull feathers. If they can't find enough feathers, they'll pluck their own feathers. And they will use straw wrappers because they look so much like feathers and they act like feathers. So tree swallows use feathers. Just a couple more things I want to show you. This right here is a little wren house. It's got a much smaller hole. I think this may be only about 3/4 of an inch. So the bigger birds are not going to get in there. Same with this hole of the bluebird box being 1.5 inches. You're not going to get your starlings in those holes. And then lastly, I do want to show you the box that our prothonotary warbler people like to use is made from a fiber jar, Metamucil or whatever fiber. It's very small. And they put in some ventilation on the side, a small hole in the front. And I'm going to show you the inside of this because this is an actual nest cavity. I don't know if you can see that, but there is an actual nest in here. So there's sometimes 6, 7, 8 babies in this very small container. These are placed in the watery areas. So to check these boxes, you need to use chest waders typically. I just want to run a real quick slideshow, and then we'll get to questions and the rest of Julie's. Julie, how much time do you need? Because I don't want to take up too much for the rest of yours.
Oh, I can go through it quickly, probably 5 minutes.
Okay, all right, let me just quickly run through this, then let's see if I can get it up here without problems. Okay, so here's a woodpecker. Flicker is actually using a nest box, which is kind of unusual. Our little nuthatch is up in their forest tree there, feeding one another. And here you see the chickadee nest, again using...
I don't think we can see it yet, Cindy.
Oh, you can't? Huh.
No, you want to hit share and then click that part of your desktop that has it.
Okay, hold on a second. Let's see if I can get out of here for a second. I don't know. Now I'm wondering where in the world. Okay, so I click share first, which I did. Yep. And then I'm back down. Let's see if this, can you see it now?
No, you hit share and then click on your presentation.
Yeah, for some reason my presentation is only on the toolbar down low.
Well, click on wherever you see it.
All right, let me try this again. Share. Oh, here we go. Do you see it now?
It is coming up now, yes.
Okay. I'll just start it for, well, I'll go ahead and start over, but it will be very quickly. I'll just go through here. Flicker with the, these are all taken at the local parks, all these pictures. So this is somebody, some people enjoying the nature and what really the joy of what it is to have nesting boxes. Now in this owl nest, well, here's a different one with the screech owl in it. But in that other nest, lo and behold, we found a raccoon, one of our predators that gets into these boxes sometime. Now the bluebird, I love the bluebird, but so did the writer of the song Over the Rainbow. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh why can't I? Again, the neat cup that the bluebird makes. And the little bit of blue starting to show through on the baby feathers. Of course, you want to monitor your bluebird trails, and this is one of the gentlemen that monitored our trails at the park. And you want to record your data. And then you want to share the joy of the box. Now they do have their little puppy in there. It's not advisable to take a dog to your bluebird boxes. They're very curious and they might get themselves in trouble. Again, tree swallows use feathers to line their nest. The babies come out naked. But it's not long before they're ready to fledge. Prothonotary warblers is a big hit here near where I live, which is Mosquito Lake State Park. It's very wet, swampy forest. And so we do have a lot of success with the prothonotary jars that we put up. And it's fun for kids and adults alike to check these. You can see she's got her chest waders on there, looking down into the box from above. These are the only cavity nesting warblers east of the Mississippi. It's really fun when you see them come crawling out of their boxes and taking their first flight. And now the purple martins, again, as Julie stated, they need to roost communally. And so we have another group of volunteers that checks the nests. In this instance, there's 12 different condos, basically. And of course, then the people get to check out the goings on in these boxes. Wood duck box, there I said earlier, they have a kind of a horizontal oval. And they apparently use their some of their down feathers to line their nesting boxes. And the house wren stuffs those branches into their boxes so nobody else can get to that box, even if they choose not to use it. And finally, lastly, the cute little tufted titmouse. Okay, Julie, it's up to you.
Okay, let's finish this with some factors that you want to think about for success. And you'll have to tell me, Jenna and Lauren, if it's up.
Not yet. Still see you right now. A lot of times it just takes a second.
Okay. I've got it showing on mine.
We're still
not
seeing you to hit share, and then it should have a red box around it.
Yeah, I did. Let's see.
Hey, Julie, try one more time. Mine was still saying that I was sharing. I don't know. I wasn't because you guys were clearly here, but try it again. There you go.
Oh, there. Yeah, I think it's going to go this time, Julie. It has come up. I'm sending it live. It says it'll continue in a minute. There you are, Julie. You're good.
Okay, I didn't want it to start at the beginning. It looks like it is. So let me, oh, I'm having problems here.
It does look like you're freezing up a little bit.
Yeah.
So while you work that out, I checked the results of the questions that we had asked folks about, and you guys have covered most of them. So people were interested in hearing about screech owls, American kestrels, bluebirds, and downy woodpeckers. And so there does seem to be a lot of interest today in kestrels. When we asked folks what boxes, if they had boxes, we have people who have bluebirds and house wrens, Carolina chickadees. There is one of our viewers right now that actually has 8 nest boxes at their house. That's fantastic. They have seen chickadees and house wrens. And then we do have another response where somebody just built one and they're hoping for kestrels. So it seems like kestrels are a pretty popular bird that people would like to see in their yards.
When you mentioned that earlier, Jenna, I got out my Ohio Breeding Bird Atlas to check, and they have been in decline for some years. So putting out a kestrel box would be a great thing to do to help this species along. And there is a actual partnership between the Ohio Bird Conservation Initiative, Ohio Ornithological Society, Ohio Division of Wildlife, and the Ohio Department of Transportation to establish nest boxes on highway signs in Wyandotte and Crawford counties to try to increase
great idea.
Increase kestrel numbers.
Good to know.
Can you, is my
I think we're good now. Yep, says factors for success.
Okay, awesome. So let me go through this quickly. I know we're almost out of time. Please make sure that you have the right box for the right bird. And this image is from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology Nest Watch site, which I will show you that link in just a moment. You just want to always make sure you've got the right dimensions, the right entry hole. Everything is measured, the width, the depth, where you put the floor, how you put the floor up. It's just so important if you want to get that specific bird that you're trying to attract. In Ohio, this is not the time to install a nest box because we're almost into August and the birds are done with their nesting for the season, mostly. There's always outliers, but for Ohio, this would be the good time for you to construct your nest box, get your pole, get your baffles and predator guards, have it all set. So then in late February or early March, you can install your nest boxes. If you want to attract owls and you know you have screech owls or barred owls nearby, then you'll want to put your nest boxes up in late fall because owls are early nesters. The predators that you have to consider are raccoons, cats, snakes, squirrels, and chipmunks. Those are the main predators. So it's always a good idea to put a baffle on your pole. This is a stovepipe baffle, and basically I went to a hardware store and bought the stovepipe. I painted it brown so that it would blend in with the forest surroundings. And there's mesh wire at the top that prevents anything that was able to climb up on the inside to actually reach the box. The plans for making one of these stovepipe baffles are also on the Cornell's Nest Watch site. And a Noel guard is a predator guard that you make out of hardware cloth. You form it into a square and staple it to the front of your box over the entry hole. This makes it even harder for a raccoon or a cat or chipmunk to get into that box or to reach into that box. So if you can have both the baffle and the guard, you're doing really well to protect your nesting birds. Cindy already mentioned the house sparrow, which is an invasive species that you really do not want using your boxes. And European starlings are also an invasive species that you have to keep track of and make sure that have not basically invaded your nest boxes. Once you put up a nest box, you will want to monitor it. We already talked about keeping track of predators. Are the babies okay? Do you have a problem with mites or blowfly larvae? You'll want to clean out old nests to encourage a new nest. Bluebirds will have up to 3 broods in the same nesting season. And then at the end of the season, you'll clean out the nest box, see if it needs any repairs, and you might want to participate in the Nest Watch Citizen Science Project, where you keep track of your baby numbers and submit that data as part of that project. One last thing that I want to mention that is so important, and that is the fact that 96% of all terrestrial bird species rear their young on insects. You have to have insects. Caterpillars are particularly important. They're even more important than the flies and beetles and crickets. That is because, for one example, it takes 5,000 caterpillars to feed a single clutch of chickadees. 5,000. That's a lot of caterpillars. The point is that if you want bird reproduction on your property or in your backyard, then you've got to sustain a healthy insect population. This means you cannot use pesticides if you want to raise birds. You don't want baby birds being fed insects that have chemicals on them. And you need to have enough, as we already said, 5,000 caterpillars. So using pesticides does not equate with raising healthy birds. Your goal is to have a habitat that looks like this, where you're encouraging insect life to visit your property and your yard. You want to have as much insect life, diversity of insect life as possible to have healthy cavity nesting birds. So we'll end with some resources. The top one that I like is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Nest Watch site. You can find nest box plans for any species that you might want to attract with a nest box, as well as lots of good natural history information about all those species. If you are only interested in bluebirds, the cialis.org website is all about bluebirds and bluebird conservation. It's amazing how much information is on that site just about bluebirds. Also, the Ohio Bird Conservation Initiative has nest box plans and natural history information, related information about cavity nesters. And then Penn State Extension actually has a link to less harmful pesticides, or what we call soft pesticides, that could be alternatives if you really have something that you need to take care of with a pesticide. So thank you all for joining us today. I included our contact information because we would love for you to ask questions when you think of them, and please don't hesitate to contact either myself or Cindy if you think of questions after the webinar.
We do have a few questions. I know we're a little bit over, but just real quick here. We have a question from someone. Do the wire cages outside prevent house sparrows from entering the nest boxes? They're a real problem for the bluebirds.
No, that Noel guard would not prevent a house sparrow from going in. House sparrows are a real horrible issue. And honestly, one thing you can do if you see a house sparrow in your box, obviously remove the nest. Sometimes they just keep on coming back and rebuilding. I have taken house sparrow eggs out of the nest and put them in my freezer overnight so that the eggs are no longer viable. Then put the eggs back in the nest so that that pair of house sparrows will just pay attention to that box, and my other boxes, I'm hoping they will leave alone. So that's one thing you can try to do. But no, that Noel guard will keep raccoons and cats out, but it will not stop a house sparrow.
Okay, thanks, Julie. We've got two more questions. A user by the name of Nest Nerd, love the name, said, we found a nest with bluebirds, we found a nest with birds' eggs, but the next day one of the eggs had a hole through it. And they were wondering what possibly could have made a hole in the egg.
That could have been a house wren. House wrens will do that. They will go into other birds' boxes and puncture the eggs. That's my guess. I don't know if Cindy has any guess.
I think house sparrows will also do that. I think
Okay.
either one will do that.
All right, so chances are another bird trying to get into the nest. Okay, and then our final question today comes from Deb, who shared with us her mailbox nest. And she said that her mailbox wrens finished up their nest on July 17th, and she's wondering when she could expect to see chicks.
July 17th. Let me think here.
Probably 1 egg per day, right, Julie?
Yeah, and that's been less than 2 weeks. So they're probably still incubating. I would say I would need to look up for sure because each species is different, but usually around 2 weeks for incubation. So Friday would be 2 weeks, and then they're going to be, of course, very tiny, but she should have chicks in there, I would say this weekend probably. And that's without me looking up the exact days for Carolina wrens, because again, each species has a different incubation period. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
I was just going to say, one thing to caution you about is to keep good records on that, to look up how long they stay in the nest, and then to make sure you don't bother that nest within the last several days, because you don't want those babies to fledge early.
Yes, absolutely. You don't want them jumping out before they're ready. And you also, Deb, you also don't want to look in the nest box while the mother bird is incubating. Once those chicks have hatched, those parents will come and take care of those chicks with any disturbance that you might, with you having looked into the box. But the most vulnerable time is when the mother is incubating the eggs, and then, as Cindy said, when the young are ready to leave.
All right. Well, ladies, thank you so much. We're going to wrap it up for today. We went a little bit over. We appreciate everybody who stuck with us. Thank you for viewing. This is the last in the Ohio Bird's Eye series, but watch the ODNR and Division Facebook pages, because we've got a whole bunch of other webinar series. Our geology folks are doing them, forestry's doing them. I believe that the Parks and Watercraft crew will be back with you probably in September. Not sure what our next series are. Possibly reptiles is one thing that we're talking about. So watch those pages, and I'm sure, over the course of the year, we're going to have something for everybody. So thanks for joining us, and have a good day. Bye.